everybody out there. I'm sorry I wasn't able to post yesterday. Things got really hectic around here and I could not get it together. I could not find the time to do one yesterday, but I'm going to really try to make it up to everybody, and I'm going to try to do 2 this afternoon. But before I do, I just want to say thank you. I got some videos yesterday on Facebook from Mason and Cole, and then I got another one from Gloria's adorable twins that have been watching and keeping up. I really didn't know anybody else was really watching. Oh, and Miss Hawkins' class too. Miss Hawkins' class, if you guys are out there, hey. But I didn't know anybody was watching besides my nephew, Robert. Hey, Robert. So just want to say thank you. Those videos were super sweet, and it made my day. It really did. But anyway, I want to go ahead and get started. Today's chapter is called The Frog. And for those of you that are reading along with me, we're going to start on page 21. So let's go ahead and get started. To pay her back for the glass eye in his root beer, Mr. Twit decided that he would put a frog in Mrs. Twit's bed. He got a big one down by the pond and carried it back secretly in a box. That night, when Mrs. Twit was in the bathroom getting ready for bed, Mr. Twit slipped the frog between her sheets. Then he got into his own bed and waited for the fun to begin. Mrs. Twit came back and climbed into her bed and put out the light. There she lay in the dark, scratching her tummy. Her tummy was itching. Dirty old hags like her always have itchy tummies. Then all of a sudden she felt something cold and slimy crawling over her feet. She screamed. "What's the matter with you?" Mr. Twit said. "Help!" screamed Mrs. Twit, bouncing about. "There's something in my bed!" "I bet it's that giant skillywiggler I saw on the floor just now," Mr. Twit said. "That what?" screamed Mrs. Twit. "I tried to kill it, but it got away," Mr. Twit said. "It's got teeth like screwdrivers." "Help!" screamed Mrs. Twit. "Save me! It's all over my feet!" "It'll bite off your toes," said Mr. Twit. Mrs. Twit fainted. Mr. Twit got out of bed and fetched a jug of cold water. He poured the water over Mrs. Twit's head to revive her. The frog crawled up from under the sheets to get near the water. It started jumping about on the pillow. Frogs love water, and this one was having a good time. When Mrs. Twit came to, the frog had just jumped onto her face. This is not a nice thing to happen to anyone at bed at night. She screamed again. "By golly, it is a giant skillywiggler," Mr. Twit said. "It'll bite off your nose." Mrs. Twit leapt out of bed and flew downstairs and spent the night on the sofa. The frog went to sleep on her pillow. The wormy spaghetti. The next day, to pay Mr. Twit back for the frog trick, Mrs. Twit sneaked out into the garden and dug up some worms. She chose big, long ones and put them in a tin and carried the tin back to the house under her apron. At 1 o'clock, she cooked spaghetti for lunch, and she mixed the worms with the spaghetti, but only on her husband's plate. The worms didn't show because everything was covered with tomato sauce and sprinkled with cheese. "Hey, my spaghetti's moving!" cried Mr. Twit, poking around in it with his fork. "It's a new kind," Mrs. Twit said, taking a mouthful from her own plate, which of course had no worms. "It's called squiggly spaghetti. It's delicious. Eat it up while it's nice and hot." Mr. Twit started eating. twisting the long tomato-covered strings around his fork and shoveling them into his mouth. Soon, there was tomato sauce all over his hairy chin. "It's not as good as the ordinary kind," he said, talking with his mouth full. "It's too squishy." "I find it rather tasty," Mrs. Twits said. She was watching him from the other end of the table, and it gave her great pleasure to see him eating worms. "I find it rather bitter," Mr. Twits said. "It's got a distinctly bitter flavor. Buy the other kind next time." Mrs. Twit waited until Mr. Twit had eaten the whole plateful. Then she said, "You want to know why your spaghetti was squishy?" Mr. Twit wiped the tomato sauce from his beard with a corner of the tablecloth. "Why?" he said. "And why it had a nasty bitter taste?" "Why?" he said. "Because it was worms!" cried Mrs. Twit, clapping her hands and stamping her feet on the floor and rocking with horrible laughter. That's it, guys. That's the end of our chapter for today. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.